In a city of towering glass and golden mansions, one girl was born into endless wealth, yet crushed under the weight of failure. Night after night, she battled tests she could never pass, carrying the shame of never being enough. But in the shadows of her father's empire, an unexpected stranger waited, the kind of man no one noticed, yet the only one who held the secret that could change her life forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you are watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. The city skyline glittered with light, and at its center stood a mansion so tall and wide it looked like a crown placed upon the hills. To anyone passing by, the house was a symbol of victory, a fortress built by power and wealth. But behind those glowing windows, silence ruled, and at the heart of that silence was a young girl named Amelia Hartford. Amelia was the only daughter of one of the richest men in the city, a man who believed in winning at all costs. Her father, Richard Hartford, had built a fortune in real estate, turning empty land into towers of steel and glass. To him, success was not just important, it was the only thing that mattered. And for his daughter, there was no greater expectation than perfection. But Amelia's hands trembled as she held yet another failed test, the red marks running across the paper like cuts. She had private tutors, the best schools, and every resource money could buy. Still, no matter how many hours she studied, the results never changed. Failure followed her like a shadow. Her father never shouted. Instead, he looked at her with cold disappointment. His silence felt heavier than words. He would glance at her test scores, shake his head, and return to his phone or his endless business calls. To Amelia, those moments were worse than anger. They were proof that in his eyes, she was invisible, a crack in his perfect empire. In the grand dining hall, Amelia sat across a golden table, so long it felt like a river of wealth separating her from the man who should have been closest. Meals passed with only the sound of silverware and the tapping of screens. He rarely asked about her day. He rarely even looked up. In the car rides to school, black-suited drivers filled the space where her father should have been. Chauffeurs drove her through the gates of her private academy, but no warm words of encouragement followed. Amelia would step out, her small figure lost among towering walls, carrying with her the heavy belief that she was not enough. Day after day, she drowned in pressure. Every page of her notebook seemed to bleed red marks and corrections. Every test felt like proof of her weakness. She was not stupid, and deep down she knew it. But under the crushing weight of expectation, her confidence cracked. The harder she tried, the deeper she seemed to sink. That winter, after another meeting with her principal, her father stormed out of the building, his face stiff with disapproval. He did not speak to her. He simply left her behind with the staff, as if she were a mistake to be managed rather than a daughter to be loved. Alone in the hallway, Amelia sank to the cold marble floor, her test paper crumpled in her hands. Tears streaked her cheeks, and her small shoulders shook under the weight of shame. She thought about all the times she had tried, all the times she had failed, and all the times she had watched her father's expression harden against her. She whispered to herself that maybe she would never be enough. Maybe her life would always be measured by red marks and silence. She felt invisible, forgotten, and broken. But unknown to her, someone else had been watching. Not a teacher, not a tutor, not a family member. In the quiet of that hallway, as her tears fell, the soft sound of footsteps approached. It was the sound of a broom brushing across the marble floor, steady and unhurried. A figure in a navy uniform moved in the shadows, sleeves rolled up, carrying nothing but tools of labor. He was not part of her world of power and wealth. He was not someone anyone would notice, Yet he noticed her. In that moment, Amelia had no idea that this stranger, this man who worked in silence and swept the floors of her father's empire, would hold the secret that could change her life. The mansion lights still shone like a crown of wealth across the skyline. But inside, at the edge of that quiet hallway, something far more powerful than riches was about to begin. It was not money, it was not prestige, it was a story waiting to unfold, a story about patience, belief, and the kind of strength no fortune could buy. And for Amelia Hartford, whose world had been nothing but silence and failure, the first chapter of that story was about to be written. The broom moved across the floor in a slow, steady rhythm. The sound echoed softly through the empty hallway, mixing with the quiet sobs of Amelia Hartford. She tried to wipe her tears before anyone could see, but her crumpled test paper betrayed her. Its bright red F stood out like a wound. A man pushing the broom stopped a few feet away. ... His name was Daniel Reyes. He was a janitor who worked long nights in the building, cleaning what others ignored. His uniform was faded, and his hands were rough from years of labor. But his eyes carried something that wealth could never buy: kindness. Daniel had noticed the girl before. He had seen her walk through the halls with her head down, tutors at her side, and the weight of the world on her shoulders. He had seen her father pass by without a glance, too busy with his empire to notice the pain in his daughter's face. When Daniel saw her crouched on the cold marble floor, he did not see the daughter of a billionaire. He did not see wealth or status. He simply saw a child who was hurting. He placed the broom against the wall and slowly knelt down beside her. "Tough day?" he asked gently, his voice steady and calm. Amelia quickly tried to hide the paper, pressing it against her chest. But the shame was too heavy. Her tears betrayed her silence. She expected him to laugh, or worse, to pity her. Instead, Daniel simply waited. He did not push. He did not scold. He gave her the gift no one else had offered: patience. After a long pause, he said, "You know, mistakes don't mean the end. They mean you're still learning." Amelia blinked at him, confused. No tutor had ever spoken to her like that. Her father certainly hadn't. To her, mistakes were nothing but proof of failure. But Daniel's words carried no judgment, only understanding. In the days that followed, their paths crossed again. At first, Amelia thought it was coincidence. She would linger after tutoring sessions, not ready to face the silence of the mansion, and there he would be, sweeping the same endless hallways. Each time, Daniel offered a small word of encouragement, a simple truth wrapped in gentle wisdom. One afternoon, she asked him why he never seemed frustrated with his work. He smiled faintly and pointed to a stubborn stain on the floor. "See this mark? If I rush, it stays. But if I'm patient, if I keep working at it, eventually it fades. Life's problems are the same. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going." To Amelia, those words were more valuable than all the textbooks she had studied. For the first time, she began to see her mistakes not as proof of weakness, but as part of the process. Slowly, she started asking Daniel questions about her studies, about life, about how he managed to stay so calm when everything seemed so hard. He told her about his son, a little boy he was raising on his own. He spoke of working 2 jobs, of long nights and early mornings, of bills that never seemed to end. And yet, in all his struggles, he carried one belief: "You're never truly failing if you keep trying," he told her. His stories were not grand speeches. They were simple, clear, and human. But for Amelia, they were revolutionary. No one had ever taught her that patience mattered more than speed, or that progress mattered more than perfection. She began to stay longer after school, sometimes just to catch a few words from him. And Daniel, always busy with his broom or his mop, always had time for her questions. The more they talked, the more she realized how much she had been missing. It wasn't money she needed, or another tutor, or another lecture. It was belief. Belief that mistakes could be lessons. Belief that failure was not a wall, but a step. Belief that even she, the girl who always stumbled, could rise again. Weeks passed, and Amelia carried his words into her studies. She tried breaking problems into smaller parts, just as Daniel had shown her when fixing a broken chair in the hallway. She practiced patience, telling herself that every small improvement was worth celebrating. Her test scores still showed red marks, but now she saw them differently. Instead of shame, she saw them as signs she was still learning. And slowly, little by little, the red marks began to fade. Daniel's wisdom was not loud, but it was steady. Like the sound of his broom sweeping across the floor. It worked quietly, reshaping Amelia's world. She did not yet know it, but his lessons would carry her far beyond her grades. They would give her something she had never known before, the courage to believe in herself. The weeks that followed became a turning point for Amelia Hartford. Where once she carried her notebooks like heavy chains, she now opened them with a cautious hope. Daniel's words echoed in her mind each time she sat down to study. Progress is built step by step, not overnight. For the first time in her young life, she began to celebrate the smallest victories. When she solved a single math problem without error, she smiled to herself. When she remembered a history date correctly, she felt a spark of pride. The red marks on her papers still appeared, but fewer each week. Each correction no longer felt like a weapon against her confidence, but like a guide pointing her toward growth. Her teachers noticed the difference. Her classmates, who once whispered about the billionaire's daughter who always failed, now noticed the quiet determination in her eyes. She was not suddenly the best student, but she was no longer the girl who gave up before trying. Daniel's influence continued to grow in her life. She sought him out in the quiet corners of the building, eager for advice, eager for encouragement. Sometimes he spoke about simple things, like how he saved money or how he fixed a leaky pipe at home. Other times, he spoke about the importance of breathing when the world felt too heavy. His wisdom was never complicated, but it reached deeper than any lecture or textbook ever could. With each passing day, Amelia began to carry herself differently. She lifted her chin higher. She started answering questions in class, even when unsure. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she froze, but she remembered what Daniel had said. A stumble is not the end of the road. It is just another step forward. Still, the journey was not easy. There were nights when her old doubts returned, like shadows creeping into her room. There were tests where the red marks cut deep into her heart again. On those nights, she wanted to crumble back into the silence of failure. But each time, she remembered the janitor's steady voice and the sound of his broom sweeping against the marble floors. One evening, as she walked through the hallways after a difficult exam, she found Daniel polishing the glass doors. Without saying a word, he handed her a cloth and motioned for her to help. Confused, she began to wipe the glass beside him. After a few minutes, he said quietly, "Notice how the glass looks cloudy at first, but each wipe makes it clearer. Life is the same. Every effort, no matter how small, makes the view brighter." Amelia smiled, realizing that even her failures were part of clearing the glass. Slowly, steadily, the view of her own future was becoming clearer. Months passed, and her test scores began to climb. At first, it was a failing grade, rising to a passing one. Then a passing grade, moving to a respectable score. Each improvement was celebrated silently within her heart, though she still longed for her father to notice. Richard Hartford remained distant, his empire consuming his attention. Yet even he began to see something different in his daughter. He noticed her shoulders were no longer slumped. He noticed a spark in her voice when she spoke. Though he never mentioned it, a quiet curiosity grew in him. The true test of Amelia's growth came one evening during a formal dinner at the mansion. The long golden table was filled with her father's business associates, powerful men and women who measured everything in terms of success. Amelia sat quietly, as she always did, expecting to pass the evening unnoticed. But then one of the guests turned to her with a question. It was a difficult question about history, a subject she had struggled with endlessly. Her father's sharp eyes fixed on her, waiting for the familiar stumble, waiting for the silence of defeat. For a moment, fear surged through Amelia. The old doubt whispered that she would fail, that she would embarrass herself again. But then she remembered Daniel's words, "Progress is step by step. Courage is choosing to stand even when you tremble." She took a breath, lifted her chin, and spoke. Her answer was clear, confident, and correct. The room grew quiet, and all eyes turned toward her. Her father's expression softened for the first time in years, his pride breaking through the cracks of his usual coldness. Amelia's heart raced, but she did not shrink back. She had faced the moment she once feared most, and she had stood tall. This was more than a single answer at a dinner table. It was proof that her courage was real, that she was no longer defined by red marks and silence. And deep within her, she knew that this strength had been built not by wealth, but by the quiet wisdom of a man who swept the floors of her father's empire. Her rise had only just begun. The golden dining hall glowed with polished light as the evening drew to a close. Laughter and conversation filled the room, but Richard Hartford sat in silence, his gaze still fixed on his daughter. Moments earlier, Amelia had spoken with confidence in front of his most trusted associates. Her answer had been correct, but it was more than knowledge that had caught his attention. It was the way she spoke, steady and clear, with a strength he had never seen before. For years, he had watched her struggle. He had spent money on tutors, sent her to elite schools, and filled her schedule with the best resources money could buy. None of it had worked. Yet suddenly, his daughter seemed different. She carried herself with a quiet power, as though she had found a secret he had failed to give her. Richard's curiosity turned into suspicion. Over the next few days, he began to watch her more closely. He noticed the way she lingered in the hallways after school, the way her eyes lit up when speaking to someone unseen. One evening, staying later than usual at his office, he discovered the truth. From the shadows, he saw his daughter sitting on a bench near the lobby, a notebook in her hands. Beside her sat Daniel Reyes, the janitor. His sleeves were rolled up, his face tired from long hours, yet his voice was calm and steady. He was teaching her how to break problems into smaller steps, guiding her with the patience of a man who knew the value of time. Richard's first reaction was anger. How could his daughter, heir to his empire, be learning from a janitor? Shame burned through him at the thought. He had paid fortunes for tutors, yet here she was, finding strength from someone society overlooked. But as he watched longer, something inside him shifted. He saw the way Daniel looked at Amelia, not with judgment, not with disappointment, but with belief. He saw the way his daughter's face brightened under that belief, the way she leaned forward with focus and determination. It was then that Richard realized what he had never given her. He had given her wealth, but never kindness. He had given her opportunity, but never belief. The truth cut deep. Money could buy education, but it could not buy encouragement. It could build towers, but it could not build confidence. For the first time, Richard understood that his empire had blinded him to the one thing his daughter truly needed. In the months that followed, Amelia's growth continued. Her test scores improved, her teachers praised her dedication, and her classmates saw her in a new light. But more importantly, she began to see herself differently. She no longer measured her worth by red marks or cold silence. She measured it by courage, effort, and resilience. Daniel remained at her side, not as a tutor, but as a quiet guide. He reminded her again and again that mistakes were not the end, but stepping stones. He taught her that the world would always try to measure her, but the only measure that truly mattered was how much heart she gave to the fight. Richard, though still a man of few words, began to soften. He did not fully understand how to express his pride, but he began to notice his daughter more. He watched her with new eyes, humbled by the lesson she had learned from someone he had once overlooked. Yet the story did not end there. The greatest transformation came not only in Amelia's achievements, but in what she chose to do with her newfound strength. One afternoon, she visited Daniel's modest home. There she met his young son, a boy struggling with his own schoolwork. Sitting beside him at the kitchen table, Amelia guided him gently, repeating the very words Daniel had once shared with her. "Don't rush. Every step counts. Mistakes mean you're learning." The boy's eyes lit up with the same spark she had once felt. In that moment, Amelia understood the true meaning of the gift she had been given. Belief was not meant to be kept. It was meant to be passed on. Kindness was not a treasure to guard, but a torch to carry forward. And so, the girl who had once drowned in failure became a light for others. Her story was no longer just about falling and rising again. It was about how one act of quiet belief could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what anyone expected. The city skyline still shone with the mansion lights, a crown of wealth perched above the world. But the real crown was invisible, resting not on towers of glass, but in the hearts of those who dared to care. Amelia's life had been transformed by a janitor's wisdom, and now she carried that wisdom into the lives of others. Her story was proof that true greatness is not measured in money or titles, but in the courage to believe and the kindness to share that belief. And that truth, revealed in silence and carried forward in love, would last far longer than any empire.